Hi, my name is Amy Smoot, and you're watching the second episode of Patient Stories on MCNN, Mississippi Cannabis News Network. Tonight, I'll be sharing with you two different stories. Each of the stories are very important, so I hope that you'll listen for the whole episode. Tonight's episode will be a little bit different than the last one because I'll be telling both patient stories myself. I have sent each mom a list of questions which they answered and sent back to me, so I'll be reading those on camera and telling as much of their stories as I can. Please know these parents would be joining us tonight if they could. However, it is extremely difficult for parents to discuss their critically ill children. Living their life every single day is a big enough toll. But to audibly discuss, it's just more painful than they can bear. These stories will probably make me cry on camera, to be honest. They're the reason that I am an advocate today. I have been so moved by their stories that I joined the fight myself. These kids and their families are everything to me. And I hope that you'll see them the same way. I picked these two stories to go together because I think it's incredibly important to see both sides of the argument, the coin. The first story is Rylee's story, and if you've ever had 5 minutes of my time, I have likely talked to you about Rylee. I worked with her aunt at one of my previous jobs and came to learn about Rylee and love her entire family, and just kind of have been around for their story, not their whole story, but a good bit of it. I've seen and watched them live through, and so we'll just go from there. Give me just a second here, bear with me. So I'm going to read what I read at the Senate committee hearing about Rylee. And then the second child is Myles, and so I'll read his Senate stuff as well, and then I will go over the questions from the parent that I sent the parents. So, at just 9 months of age, Rylee was admitted for seizures at one of the top children's hospitals in the nation. During this hospitalization, a CT scan was done, and it was discovered that Rylee had 60% of her brain was missing. So she had 40% of her brain. The very first hospital stay was very traumatizing. Rylee had to be stuck multiple times in every limb. Rylee had to be held down by numerous staff members as she had not even reached 1 year of life yet. In fact, Rylee's grandfathers were kicked out of the hospital because of their vocal opposition to watching their 9-month-old granddaughter go through pure agony. Unfortunately for Rylee and her family, this was only the beginning of her story. When she was finally discharged from that hospital stay, Rylee came home on so many medications. One of the medications was a gel shot to control her seizures. Her own mother had to administer the shots to Rylee, and she sobbed every single time she gave one to Rylee. This medication regimen went on for 6 months, twice a day. The side effects of this shot were horrible. At 9 months old, Rylee was covered in rashes. She tripled in body size. She even stopped eating altogether because of one medication. Keep in mind, she was still seizing all the time. These medications were not even working. For 3.5 years, the seizures and hospitalizations continued. Medication after medication were tried, and not a single one worked to stop Rylee's seizures. Rylee was put on adult doses of benzodiazepines as rescue medications. She was not even 5 years old at this point. Rylee was hospitalized so much and so often that her parents began to lose hope. They were being forced to watch their daughter slip further and further away every single day, and sometimes by the hour. Rylee was so sedated she became a shell of who she had been before the first seizure. She became catatonic, dazed, sleeping a long way from a normal 5-year-old's life. When she was 5 years old in August of 2017, she had her last hospital stay at the local children's hospital. She spent many days in the intensive care unit, and the adult rescue dosages of benzodiazepines were not even stopping her seizures. After many days and no improvements, her neurologist dismissed her from the hospital and sent her home to make preparations for her death. There was nothing more they could do for her. She had maxed out on the amounts of medication she could have at a time, any more and it could cause Rylee to quit breathing, and she was only 5 years old. Her parents did take Rylee home, but they did not prepare for their daughter to die. Instead, they packed up every single thing they owned, left their families behind, and moved to Colorado. At this point, they had no idea if medical cannabis would help their daughter, but they at least had to try. On their first visit to the children's hospital, they knew they made the right decision. Rylee and her family were now American medical refugees. Rylee had her very first dose of THC oil on October 5th of 2017. She had her last seizure on October 18th of 2017. 13 days after her first dose of THC oil was her last seizure. 13 days. For 3 years and 8 months, her parents have watched as new life was brought to Rylee. New life when they were told her life was over and she would never get better. It took Rylee months to wean off all the benzodiazepines, and she had her last dose of FDA-approved medication for her seizures on February 15th of 2018. Rylee takes THC oil 3 times a day, and for the first time in her life, she is off all prescribed seizure medications. The THC oil alone is enough to control her seizures. So Rylee's diagnoses are Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, schizencephaly, optic nerve hypoplasia, and optic nerve dysplasia. So I'm going to go now to the questions that I asked Rylee's mom. Okay. So we're going to start with the first question I said was, first tell us a little bit about your family and about Rylee. And she said Rylee was diagnosed at 9 months old in March of 2013. She wasn't meeting milestones, and after 2 previous attempts to get neurology to listen to me, they referred us to ophthalmology. They found her small optic nerves, optic nerve hypoplasia, which most of the time is going to relate to a neurological issue. So they had an MRI done through Le Bonheur, where she was poked numerous times, and they found the schizencephaly and the septic optic nerve dysplasia. Because Rylee is missing over 60% of her brain. Oh, this is the next question, excuse me. So, what causes Rylee's seizures? So it says because Rylee is missing over 60% of her brain, she suffers from seizures. She would have triggers when they lived here in Mississippi, such as loud noises, rain, sudden changes in temperature, overstimulation, and then toward the end of waking up and falling asleep would also trigger her. So the next question I asked was, tell us a little bit about the medication she was prescribed when she was a resident of Mississippi. Share all about their side effects. And is Rylee off all prescribed, FDA-approved medications? So she said she's been through 9 total medications, but the worst were the Keppra. These are all seizure medicines. Keppra says she was inconsolable and didn't sleep. Onfi, get this, you guys. Onfi is a seizure medicine that they give these kids. Onfi strengthened her seizures and caused different types of seizures. I can't even comprehend that. Sabril, it caused her to lose even more of her vision than she had before. Zonamide, I'm pronouncing that wrong, I know, which caused her to stop eating and sleeping. And Depakote, which caused hair loss and liver damage further than the Onfi. So the Onfi also caused liver damage. So yeah, these are all the medications and not all, these are some of the medications and side effects of the FDA-approved medicines that they say is okay to give our children. Huge doses over and over again, even though it doesn't stop the seizures. And it says that, some of them, it even caused different types of seizures. So not only did the seizure medicines not stop the seizures, they caused more seizures. Stiff will make your brain hurt, I promise. So I asked her when she learned about cannabis being used to treat seizure patients. So she said in the worst part of her life, she was researching Lennox-Gastaut children and therapies that were helping them when she came across another child in Colorado who has the exact same rare disease, who looks identical to her child, and they were using THC oil and had just celebrated a year of seizure freedom. And she said that was all it took. They never had a discussion about it. That was it. So the next question was, how long did it take you to consider if it would help Rylee? And she says no, that it was right away. So the next question is, while living in Mississippi, did you try CBD for Rylee? If you don't mind, can you explain why CBD does not work for her? Rylee actually needs a very high concentration of THC with very little CBD, correct? So she says, when Rylee was a baby, we heard of Charlotte Fiji, but never thought it could help back then. We did try CBD, and between the interaction with the pharmaceuticals and it just not being what Rylee needed, we stopped using, and we knew we needed THC. THC is what slowed her brain down to function at normal speed. Lots of epileptic children require THC in Colorado. CBD is often just not strong enough. The bottle of oil that Rylee uses is a 10-to-1 THC to CBD concentration. 1,100 total milligrams of THC in the bottle and 100 milligrams of CBD. Her total dose is 0.03 cc's 3 times per day. She says that no one really taught them dosing. It was something they had to find on their own. They were guided to always start small, and it would also leave room for increases as the children got older or their conditions changed. You have to find their sweet spot. So I imagine that every patient's different, just like with prescribed medicine. Certain therapies work for some people and certain therapies just don't work. So I asked her, what are the side effects that Rylee has from cannabis? And she says absolutely no side effects other than her brain has been functioning at a normal pace, which allows her to make gains physically and cognitively. So no, once again, no side effects. This is the second, I know this is only the second interview, but this is the second patient, second interview that has said they have no side effects whatsoever from their dosage of THC, which is kind of incredible, which we all knew, but it's just nice to hear real world examples, that there's not documented examples. So I asked her, Jessica's been great to help anybody in Mississippi as much as she could, as just living this out loud for everyone to see. It's got to be difficult, but she's just been pouring into herself into Mississippi legalization, to reaching out to families who have seizing children, to kind of be a friend, offer hope. She's just an incredible resource. So I asked her, I said, what do you want to tell the legislators as they start drafting the medical cannabis bill? The senators and representatives have been told Rylee's story. Do you hope them hearing her story has changed some of their minds? So she said, my only message to them is, I understand the hesitancy based on the beliefs and the stigma surrounding the plant. I too was raised that it was bad and that no good could come from this plant. But here's the thing, it's a plant. And it's been proven for all who are willing to open their minds and hearts up that it is medicinal. My child was dying. When it became clear to me that there wasn't any pharmaceutical that could save my child without damaging her in other ways which could also take her from me, I opened my mind and I started looking for anything here on God's green earth that could save my daughter's life. Because although everyone around me could have carried on with their lives, if she had passed, it would have ruined me and I would have never moved on. Excuse me, y'all, I'm sorry. What's the point of living if your child is gone from this earth? When Rylee stopped seizing and started making progress for the first time in her life, I made it my life's goal to use what we went through to save another life. I have no doubt my daughter would be dead without cannabis. All life is precious. Why wasn't my daughter's life precious enough to our lawmakers and doctors to save? And if we truly believe that all life is precious, then let's save other children's lives. Let's use Rylee's story as something to learn and grow from. Let her story be a light in the darkness, and let her story be someone else's story. Let Rylee help save another life. I told y'all this was going to happen. You hear these stories and it changes you at the core. Excuse me. Okay. So we kind of switched gears here, and I said another topic I'd love to discuss with you is the toll of having a severely medically fragile child. Rylee is not an only child. She is the oldest child, but she has other siblings. Talk to us about the weight of all of it. I think it's imperative for people to hear the hard stuff too, if you're able. So she said siblings suffer just as much. When Avery, which is one of Riley's siblings, was a baby, she would mimic Riley's seizures. And they both know that their sister needs extra help and attention. And they grow faster than they should have to by seeing what their sibling goes through. They also miss out on a lot of normal things because their sister can't do it, and we have to try to balance everyone's needs. They will someday, as adults, I'm sure, need therapy because of the things our family has and will go through. They are also going to grow up to be compassionate and loving humans because they see the world from a different point of view. So, I asked, what is one thing you wish to tell parents with very sick children who still live in Mississippi? And she said, the piece of advice I can give is cherish every moment. Get on your knees and pray and look for the silver lining. It's okay to feel the emotions, but don't let yourself stay there or you'll never enjoy the little moments that matter the most. Be a warrior for your child and literally celebrate everything. It matters. Your child matters and you matter. And be there for other special needs parents. Share your own experience and let yourself be vulnerable. You never know who's watching that could benefit from your story. Let your own child's legacy be of good and not just the heartache that we all experience. Sorry. So that's pretty much sums up what her mom says. And one other thing that she wants to say to other parents is that she says they get stuck in the hole a lot. She herself went down there and struggled hard. And she said she wanted to die so that she could go before Rylee. She says she knows that it exists, and she never wants anyone to go through that and stay there. It's hard. She wants to help parents see the light, and she wants Riley's story to be about hope and light. And it is. She has really, truly used Riley's story for good for every resident of Mississippi, for every child, for every adult that is suffering, fighting. Rylee's story has proven to us that cannabis can and will, and it'll help. It'll give these parents, these families, these children some hope and seizure freedom. I mean, it takes your breath away because you start to consider what would have happened if Rylee hadn't moved to Colorado. Where would she and her family be today? It's terrifying. So we're going to make sure that doesn't happen for any of these other children. That's why we have to get up every day and email and phone call and ask for meetings with these representatives to let them know that every single patient that was counting on this medical program counts. There's a reason it passed with overwhelming majority. It would help so many people in this state, from kids to grown-ups. I said it on the last one with Bethany, from children to grandmas. We prescribe narcotics like they're Pez coming out of a Pez machine. There's no reason we can't allow cannabis to be given. Rylee's dose is 0.03 cc's 3 times a day. That is a fraction of THC that she's taking in, and it allows her complete seizure freedom. So, all right, the next patient I'm going to tell you about tonight is Myles. Myles is 2 years old, and he lives here in Northwest Mississippi, as I said earlier, and he has Dravet syndrome, which causes him to seize all the time, and he also has status epilepticus, which means that his seizures can last for hours and hours, and they have recently, as a matter of fact. So I'm going to tell you his story. At 2 months old, Myles had his first seizure. He was taken to the same children's hospital as Rylee, and his parents were told that Myles had reflux. 1 week later, when his mom put him in the pool, he turned blue, was stiff, shaking, and lifeless. The type of seizures Myles have caused him to seize for hours at a time. Myles was just a fragile 2 months old when he seized for an excruciating 2 hours straight. Myles and his family spent the next 12 months in and out of the hospital. Myles was still seizing all the time. Myles was airlifted close to 20 times over the next several months. He was intubated, and each time he was admitted, they'd require loading doses of these FDA-approved medications. The problem was these prescriptions were making the seizures worse. Each seizure, their answer was to up Myles' dosage. They were sent to craniologists and epileptologists. All of them had another medication to add. They were not able to give Myles and his family any real help or answers. To this day, Myles is still mostly unchanged. They've tried many things: high doses, low doses, leveled doses, and so far no changes for the positive. He's just gotten worse. Myles has failed 6 pharmaceutical medications, and he is 2 years old. They had to prove to the insurance company that Myles' body was not absorbing the rescue medication before they would approve another medication for Myles. He's also been on those intramuscular shots, which were showing some help at first, but his body has become resistant to those medications, and then the pandemic started. And Myles was not able to go to the clinic to be seen because, as you know, everything was closed down, and availability was very, very slim in the height of the pandemic to get into any doctor. But I can imagine the special critical needs doctors, and things were even harder to get appointments. So they weren't able to be seen as frequently, and at 13 months old, he quit talking and wasn't walking, and he was missing all kinds of milestones and was very delayed. If you barely touched him, Myles would bruise. When they were finally able to be seen, they requested that labs be drawn, and they showed that Myles already had liver damage. So his parents were left with the impossible task to leave Myles on the narcotic that wasn't helping, or take him off all medication, and they stopped all of Myles' medications. Remarkably, he started trying to walk again. He regained his personality, but he began seizing again all the time. Now that Initiative 65 has been tossed, Mississippi might lose this family too. It just says that his parents are out of options, and they've tried every medication. They've been to the best of the best at the local children's hospital, and basically have been told that if they're not okay with putting their son on these huge giant doses of narcotic prescriptions, then they have gone as far to not see Myles as a patient. It baffles me that they're okay with pumping these kids full of these medicines that are having horrible side effects. And there's just nothing else we can do for them. We're just okay with the kids living like this, suffering. It's something I don't think I'll ever be able to understand, regardless of how hard I try. Okay, so up next, I'm going to do the questions and answers with Myles' mom. Alright, so it says, first, tell us a little bit about your family and tell us about Myles. And she said, we're from Tunica, Mississippi. My husband, Will, farms, and they have an 8-year-old daughter named Harper. Their youngest, Myles, is 2 years old, and he is all boy. And he also suffers from the Dravet's and the status epilepticus. Alright, so my next question was, next, I want you to walk us through when Myles was diagnosed. How old was he? So she says, Myles was born full-term, overall healthy pregnancy, and his first recognizable seizures started when he was 2 months old, and they have not stopped. I asked her what causes Myles' seizures, and she says Myles has a genetic mutation causing prolonged seizures that are almost impossible to stop with medication. I said, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about life since diagnosis. And she said, whew, that one question has held up this process, and I shut down for a week after reading it. My sisters told me to just skip over it, but I felt I needed to explain just how much our lives have been turned upside down since May of 2019. Our daughter was an only child for 6 years. After buying our first house together, we welcomed Myles into the world, a beautiful, healthy baby boy, so we thought. The horrific seizures began, and we quickly learned that material things are just that. We put our house on the market, and it sold within a few days. We were being flown to the children's hospital almost weekly from seizing for hours. I thought that very first flight was it for him. This became pretty regular. But each time, I died a little more inside from the thought of losing my baby boy and knowing that with each seizure, he was slipping further and further away from me. This lasted an entire year. We rented a home and thankfully found a rescue plan that could help us spend more time at home. Excuse me, y'all, I'm sorry. I'm able to administer an injection of narcotic to help stabilize him, and that worked up until the last 4 to 5 months. His seizures have started back up in frequency and length, and our rescue plan that they were using is no longer working. These adult dosages of drugs he's getting are becoming resistant, meaning he's becoming resistant to them. They're not doing anything. She says we're back to square one, and we were relying on the Initiative 65 to take place so we'd have a more reliable option that worked for us because it has worked for so many other children. Okay, I said, tell us about the medications he has been prescribed. Share all about their side effects. Myles has been on many epilepsy pharmaceuticals without success. These medications are not safe for our kids, and they're doing more harm than good. The way to describe Myles after he needs his rescue drugs is to imagine that you ran over a puppy, but it didn't die. You just sit and watch them suffer for days, moaning. Especially now that he's getting older, it's really becoming so hard to even lift him from him being so limp and lifeless. One major side effect is the drugs affecting the liver and not being monitored effectively. Myles was 18 months old and still not walking. After each seizure, they were told to increase this FDA-approved medication. Finally, after a year of our state being in a pandemic, they were finally able to be seen in the clinic with this scary lab work. They were able to wean down some, and almost immediately they had a new child. He started trying to crawl. He began to walk without assistance. He was becoming himself without feeling like a zombie. She said previously he was bruising head to toe over the smallest accident. It was scary. When we saw with how different he was without the drugs, it started to hit her. I began to regret doing as much as I'd been told by a doctor who had seen me at my lowest point in my entire life. I started to question everyone around me and really lost a lot of people who meant a lot to me during that time. No one should get to decide for you or your child to take a medication which has death listed as a side effect. At what point did you learn about cannabis being used for seizure patients? So she says, so after all the horrific medicine dosages and always being forced to increase, and each episode seeing how lifeless Myles was, I started joining social media groups. I began chatting with moms who were in the trenches of epilepsy with their child and who found relief. I researched a ton for days at a time, and I still spend the majority of my time gaining knowledge of this syndrome and how to give Myles a better quality of life and to combat these awful seizures too. She connected with a girl who is Rylee's mom, who moved to Colorado and started a whole new life because ultimately her diagnosis wasn't to be. No, sorry, that's not Rylee. Started a whole new life because ultimately her diagnosis wasn't to be here any longer with us on Earth. And she formed a relationship with her, and she told her how much their life had changed, and they never experienced another seizure after they began their cannabis journey. And honestly, that's the only way I get through some of these days. I think of them each time. The life I long for, the life we all deserve. But instead, we are considered criminals, and we are being threatened to be turned into CPS for not being fit for our children. It's like a crime to question your neurologist about treatment, and have even been told to, quote, blame myself if my child dies. When I was on the brink of just giving up to begin with. Imagine having to trust someone whose advice is to blame yourself, Mama. It's just hard. After learning about cannabis being used, did it take you a while to consider if it would help Myles? And she said, honestly, I've read so many successful cannabis testimonies from parents who exhausted all pharmaceutical options and found instant relief. It was hard not to consider it. I was clueless about medical marijuana, and I'm amazed that it isn't an option for so many suffering. I'm not sure if this would be a miracle for Myles and our family, but what does it hurt to try? And so I told her that certain politicians like to discuss the legality and availability of CBD. I said, you and I have talked about the subject in depth, and she has tried CBD for Myles. And I said, tell us about that experience. She said, oh yes, the Charlotte's Web that everyone raves over for this condition was one of our first purchases. We were so hopeful, and it did nothing for Myles. We have spent thousands on other options and haven't been successful. These kids with severe seizures need medical cannabis with THC as a treatment option. And I said, others seem to like the saying, just move where it's legal. So tell us why that is not feasible for every family. And she said, well, seeing that we're just trudging through each day and are living on one income, it makes it hard to even leave home, much less move 20 hours away. It's a risk each time we leave our home. It's a lot. I get so upset that ultimately that's our only option, is to leave here. So I said, switching gears a bit here, let's talk about Mississippi and legalization. When did you learn about Initiative 65, and did you ever think Initiative 65 would pass? And she said she was very uneducated on cannabis in general before Myles, much less about any legalization part of it. She grew up knowing it's illegal, and she never really rocked the boat and questioned anyone why. After Myles' seizures began, and he was declining more and more each seizure, and each loading dose and rescue drug, I just had to keep digging. I knew there had to be something to help these kids. If you need more clarification on the dire need of this plant, just talk to one family that it's helped. Go sit with those people and watch their children suffer without end and consider them unfit after they've found relief without the harmful side effects. It's crazy to me. This was on our ballot shortly after Myles was diagnosed. I truly felt the most relief I'd felt in this entire journey. I really believe this was God's way of saying, here, child, let's shut you up already. And so I said, how did you feel when it passed with overwhelming nonpartisan support? She said, I knew my people who had seen us go through all of this would come through. They love us. They love Myles. And I really didn't have a doubt this would be legalized and would be on a road to a new beginning. And I said, other than being absolutely crushed, how did you and your family feel about the Supreme Court's decision? She says, I still feel very angry. We, the people, voted for this. I really started to lose all hope after that. Everything has been black and white since then, and I'm constantly in prayer about how to get to a legal state for more guidance. When Myles isn't having a seizure, I'm dreaming of the day we can also say we're, quote, a year seizure free, end quote, or longer. What do you want to tell the legislators as they start drafting the medical cannabis bill? The legislators and representatives have been told Myles' story. Do you think them hearing his story could have changed some of their minds? She said it should change even the hardest heart to see someone suffer and know this could help and simply refuse to allow them the option. We're just a normal family with an ill child. I'd never harm my child or do anything I thought would make him suffer more than he already is. I hope you don't see us as a family who wants to get our child high and simply visualize a mom and a dad begging for help. A big sister who's been drugged through the darkness of her brother's condition, and a little boy who is pure happiness, needing one last treatment option. Sorry, y'all. So I said another topic I'd love to discuss with you is the toll of having a medically fragile child. Myles also is not an only child. He has an older sibling who walks in the trenches with the parents every day. Talk to us about the weight of all of it. All of it. I think it's important for people to hear the hard stuff too if you're able. If not, we can absolutely move right along. So she said this one hits hard. We desperately wanted our kids to be close in age, but now we get it. Harper needed to be older to understand that her baby brother needed a little extra attention, or all of it some days. We spent one whole year away from her while they were inpatient in the hospital. She says that is the hardest thing. She was homesick. She felt robbed of her daughter and robbed of her new baby too. She said she felt like she was losing them both. We've managed to find our way and definitely lean on one another for support to get to the next day. Harper was staying place to place. She had never stayed away from home. Everyone was suffering. And I'm still swallowing my tears just thinking of how many roles my daughter has to play, and I wish so badly she could just be a kid again. It isn't fair for her to constantly help keep her brother alive. How hard is it financially to cover Myles' medical care? We've discussed previously about Myles needing to be flown by helicopter multiple times. All of the medication he's taken, the price of those. And she says, honestly, you just make it. You stop worrying about what you think you need, and you find out what you must have to survive, and go from there. They downsized their entire life, and it wasn't easy and still isn't. Myles' medications add up to be thousands. They're simply unaffordable. We've had to go without them before due to that. The insurance company will deny the refill, and it's just always something, always a fight. I spend the other half of my life on the end of a phone fighting for help. You stop focusing so much on the stress of trying to make a way, and you start enjoying the days you have with your babies. You don't know how many you have left. That other stuff can wait. Obviously, with him being so critical, you're not able to be away from him. Finding child care for a child with such complex needs is out of the question. Working is almost impossible. I know your husband works a lot, and you do work while you can, and you've said how important it is to you. I want to hear about the lack of support systems critical families have available. People will cook, people will drop off groceries, and take the older child to spend the night. They will help in all kinds of ways, but one thing you just can't get is another you. So explain to people how hard it is for you to be the primary caregiver with no relief. And she said, whew, these keep getting tougher. Mainly because this is the real stuff. This is the part where it changes your life. It's just me, and Myles has never been away from Mama. Truly, I'm exhausted, and I'm sure everyone I encounter fully knows, but somehow each day I keep going. I fully believe that moms are superheroes. My husband, Will, farms here in the Delta. He's the one making the ends meet now, and I know it's stressful too. It's mainly just me and the kids home alone. Luckily, I enjoy my babies and was made to be a mom. I run a successful small hair salon alone, and over the past 2 years, I'm just watching things crumble. Mississippi is in critical need of pediatric home health help. I learned just to make our home life more comfortable and enjoyable as possible. Just settle in. Our small town is a huge part of our lives and how we got by. Someone is always willing to help me out, and I'm not scared to ask anymore either. You stop worrying over if anyone will do the thing, and you just ask. I found that so many people want to do pickup or drop off or grab an item from the store. So many in our corner are willing to help, and I'm forever grateful. And it said, what future do you see possible with cannabis as a treatment option for Myles? You've witnessed how it can change a seizure child's life. A child who went from seizing constantly like Myles to seizure-free for 3 years and 9 months and counting. What do you hope Myles gains from cannabis treatment other than seizure freedom? And she said, Myles deserves all the good things of this world. He most definitely deserves a break from all the seizures he's having. I'm so thankful to so many families have been able to find help and are able to say those words. And it is a dream. I find most of my relief from speaking with them and how drastically they've watched their child basically die in front of their eyes, from dying in front of their eyes to becoming a child again. Cannabis cures. In closing, is there anything else you would like to add? Oh, snap. I should have read this in my head first. I wouldn't have ever read it on camera. Okay. In closing, is there anything you would like to add? I'd like to add that Amy came into my life and has been a light in the dark for me. She didn't know me, but she witnessed firsthand the impact it's made on a child she loves. She is good people. We all are. Please just legalize their medication. Not everyone has healthy children. Our boy is a fighter, and I'm standing behind him as long as I'm allowed. Okay. Sorry, y'all. I told y'all I was going to cry, and I did. My apologies for the snot and the tears. This is just where it's at for me, guys. This is the beginning of the fight, and this is what's going to carry me to the end, is these children. These are just a small, tiny fraction of the kids across the state. I have several more families that I work with and talk to every day. Not every day, but check in with them as often as I can, and just let them know that, I'm still fighting. I'm doing what I can to help their kids. And I ask each and every one of you to do the same. It costs us nothing to support these families, support these children, and to bug our elected officials to fix the problem. I've been told we're on the 8th or 9th version of a Senate bill, and once the Senate agrees, then it goes to the House, and I understand the legislative process. I'm not ignorant to the time that it takes or what all it entails. However, these children would have had medication this month or next month, would have had cannabis cards issued to them this month, and now they have nothing. And there's nothing on the horizon. There's no date. There's no definitive answer of when we're going to have a fix or make this better. And that's just not okay. So I'm asking each one of you that watches this to take time. Go on to my Facebook page, the DeSoto County Mississippians for Medical Cannabis. the elected officials all, I have every single one of their emails listed on that page. All you have to do is search. If you can't find it, message me. Reach out to me on Facebook, Amy Smoot, Smoot. I will be more than glad to help you in any way that I can. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for bearing with me as I trudge through kind of the hard stories, the life and death stories, the kids who are, their lives are hanging in the balance, waiting for resolution. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And we will see you next Sunday for Patient Stories number 3. Take care, everyone.